I am so amazed at how we will find that Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job go together. They are the Old Testament books, as we learned, called the wisdom literature of the Bible. And today we're going to focus on chapters 1 through 9 in Proverbs. And that is where we are introduced to Lady Wisdom. Now, I'm not only going to support what we just saw, but I'm going to add to it. Now, it's a lot of info, but it's great info. To start with, I just need to reveal something as I looked at this. For me, the word fear is a trigger word. And so I kind of got stuck on that. I also was challenged by not getting sucked down into the way that Proverbs was written, because it's different from other books of the Bible. So those were my two challenges in preparing for this study, so bear with me. Now, I think we can all agree that sentences typically have 4 different functions, okay? They're declarative, right? They suggest, they give a statement, they might even make an announcement. And then they're interrogative. They are questioning. They're curious, almost like an interrogation. And imperative. Whatever is being said is important. Number 4, exclamatory. Strong emotions. There might be a surprise, or there could be anger expressed. And these functions can be drawn together in 2 larger main groups, affirmative and communicative, okay? Proverbs exhibits all of this, though sometimes more than in areas than others. But I think it's the way that Proverbs brings the pieces together, because as we continue to study it, we'll find out that fundamentally it's cause and effect. You see a lot of that, or compare and contrast. And it's super direct. It is concise. It is right to the point, all in one shot. And I love that. And so when it's making these compact, concise points, I don't know, I think it's really fun to read. And it helps with my memory. It's easier to remember, isn't it? So quickly we learn that X is Y. Or we learn that X is better than Y. Or it's not X, but it's Y. I love the linguistic form of the Proverbs. And I know that as you continue to dig into it, you are going to notice the difference as well. All right, so that was a hermeneutical lesson. And now, again, it's like you all were in seminary. So you learned a little bit about the structure, the linguistics of Proverbs. But the real deal is, we got to apply that to our life now, in the year 2020. And the wisdom of the Proverbs is real, and it can be applied. There are things in that book that we can really sink our teeth into. So just a little addition to the background. The word proverb in Hebrew means to govern or rule. Now these sayings and the reminders and the warnings, they're almost like a type of a textbook using wise sayings to teach us how to live a godly life. And you'll see a lot of repetition in the words and thoughts. Okay, I thought that's a great idea. If the Bible does it, I should probably do it too. So as we go through this, I'm going to do some repetition as a tool to help you digest the 5 weeks of 3 entire books of the Bible. You're going to love it. So, that said, if you learn nothing else from the book of Proverbs, I want you to know that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And that's chapter 1, verse 7. Understanding is fabulous, but application makes it happen. That's the key. So I kind of mentioned that I was struggling with that word fear. And that's like my personal issue, so hopefully none of you guys have any issues with fear. But it caused me to do a little digging. I thought, what the heck, Lord? You want us to be afraid of you? I don't want to be afraid of you. So, in my research, this is what I found out, particularly for this area of the Bible. And when we hear the word fear, it is interpreted as a specific sense of respect, awe, and submission. Somebody else already knew it. Where were you when I was getting all freaked out? So I thought, oh, that just really reframes everything, doesn't it? It is telling us that we are to honor and respect God, to live in reverence to his power and obey his word. We don't have to be afraid. All we have to do is to honor, respect, and obey. Whew. That made this so much easier when I got past all that. Just be mindful of trigger words. If you have a trigger word, investigate it. Try to figure out why it's a trigger to you. And we don't have enough time for me to tell you why fear is a trigger word for me. But use your imagination. All right. As you may have noticed from these first 9 chapters of Proverbs, it covers this plethora, a really wide range of topics. And they are all real life issues, every one of them. And they're applicable today. And they need attention. Now, you guys all know this, and you probably didn't even know you knew it, but Proverbs are embedded into North American culture. We all are familiar with sayings, don't count your chickens before they hatch, right? Or you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. And my grandmother's all-time favorite, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And I know for sure that she just really wanted us kids out of the kitchen. And the reality is, she was the heat in the kitchen, not what she was making. Almost every culture and language of the world uses these short, pithy, proverbial statements to pass on common sense wisdom from generation to generation. And so the book of Proverbs is not merely an anthology, but a collection of collections relating to a pattern of life which lasted for more than a millennium. And so Proverbs is for us an example of a biblical wisdom tradition. It's raising questions of values, moral behavior, the meaning of human life, and right conduct. Now, we can associate parts of the Proverbs with King Solomon, right? But there are other contributors to that book. Now, it is clearly stated that the purpose of the book of Proverbs has 2 goals. The first one is that we attain wisdom and understanding, right? The second one is actually the result of that first one, that once we have understood and attained wisdom, we need to live the right way. We need to do the right things to be just and fair. Now, it also goes on to say this, and I'm really glad, because I couldn't do those things on my own, but we are prompted to invite the Lord in that, right? That's what all the verses are saying, that true knowledge cannot be obtained without a proper relationship with God. He's our power source. He's our wisdom. He enables us to do the right and just thing. All right, stepping back, when you look at the beginning of Proverbs, it doesn't start off with that typical witty 2-line sort of interaction, but rather several warnings from a father to his son. And if you look really close, you might have noticed that Lady Wisdom chimes in twice. She kind of interrupts it a little bit in chapter 1, verses 20 through 33, where she comes right in and she's warning against rejecting wisdom. She wants to be sure that you know if you reject wisdom, that is a bad deal. The second time she interrupts is in chapter 8. And it's beautiful because she is declaring the gifts of wisdom. And that is something that you and I, we all can have that wisdom, every one of us. So chapter 8, she's telling us about the gifts of wisdom. Through these chapters, we're taught again, and I'm going to say this is the repetition piece, that wisdom can never be lived out without faith and trust in the Lord. Now, if we move on to chapter 3, look at how fast we are. We've already gotten to chapter 3. Verses 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. And in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight." It's not up to you to be making your path straight. And by the way, it's not up to you to be making anybody else's path straight. You all can relate to that, can't you? Yeah, me too. But the goal, again, is to attain wisdom and understanding, which will result, with God's help. Oh, that's beautiful too. That wasn't you? Okay. In the action of living right. And part of that living right includes those warnings that we see in chapters 5 through 7. We might not like to read those, but it's good to see them because we can gain understanding and become wise when we're on the lookout, paying attention. Most of what we read in chapters 5 through 7 are things that I think we all recognize that we should avoid. But I ask you, are you paying attention? I mean, are you just chugging along like me, just living my life, doing my thing, not really paying attention? You know, we all know that we should avoid sexual immorality, right? We know that. And quarreling, we're not supposed to do that. And we're not supposed to get into financial entanglements or be lazy or be malicious. And they say if we do that things will be easier. I kind of agree. However, you need to remember that we are human beings, and sin is really sneaky, and it sneaks on in when we aren't aware. So that is why it's important to be on the lookout, be engaged in your life, be looking around at what's going on. And that seems a little heavy, but there's good news. There's great news. God wants to help us with these things. It says it over and over and over again. We're not meant to do it alone. And for a group of women, I sense there may be just one or two of you in here that might have a little trouble with asking for help. Just saying. Not me. I want you to know that when you're in a pickle, ask for help. God gives us one another to help one another walk things out. That's part of how he shows himself to us. So, I just want you to remember that. Now, you know, when I was reading chapter 6, I got a stomach ache. And I think it's maybe the language that is used in verses 6 through 19. So if you have your Bible, you might want to look at it, or maybe you don't. Because this is where we are told of 7 things that the Lord hates. So as I look at that, I don't really know that. I think ignorance is bliss sometimes. I don't know if I want to know what the Lord hates. But here it is, girls. It's here. Arrogant eyes, lying tongues, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that plots wicked schemes, feet eager to run to evil. What? And a lying witness who gives false testimony, someone who stirs up trouble. So I read that and I thought to myself, well, I certainly would not shed innocent blood. I'm not going to kill anyone. But I think we need to be careful at being too literal with these. How about gossiping? Isn't that a form of shedding innocent blood? Isn't that killing the reputation of someone? Isn't that plotting to make them look bad? Well, guess what? That feels like a wicked scheme to me. Who would have thought? Again, we are called to be aware and warned of these things and to look at how they might impact our behavior. Ooh. Think about that. These actually can apply to us. They do apply to us. Maybe not literally, but in several different layers. Now, on a much happier note, we can move on into chapter 8. That's the fun chapter, because that's all about the gift of wisdom. Listening to Lady Wisdom. And she's telling us all about the blessings of being wise. But you know what I really loved about this? Lady Wisdom is personified as a female. And as I was just in love with that notion, a negative thing came to my head. And I remember that when I have 3 daughters, and I remember a time when I was heading off to conferences. And, I've always had this mentality of girls, we got to build them up, make them strong. I don't want them to be intimidated, especially not by men. Now, I'll just give you a little background. When I was in the business world, I think I got a little jaded. And then when I had all these girls, I thought, I better do something about this. Anyway, so I raised them to be strong and to ask questions. And anyway, so I'm at conferences, and I got into a little bit of trouble. The teacher said to me, "You didn't really tell your daughter Emily that girls were smarter than boys, did you?" And I didn't say anything. And then she went on to say, because Emily has made it perfectly clear that girls are way smarter than boys, and her mom could prove it. And so, Lord, please forgive me, I did say that. All right. So, we love it that Lady Wisdom is personified as a female. And it's bigger than that silly example I just gave. When we listen to wisdom, it leads to life. And we receive favor from the Lord. That is actually in the Bible in verse 35. For whoever finds me finds life and receives favor. Wow, I want that. That is God's intention, that wisdom should affect every part of our lives, opening every corner, nook, and cranny of our life to God's guidance and direction. God's waiting for you. He is waiting for you. Where do you need to let God in? So finally, in chapter 9, we meet 2 rivals. We meet wisdom and we meet folly. And they are competitive characters, each preparing a feast and inviting people to join them. However, it's really more than that. Wisdom represents a woman who is of responsible character, appealing to the mind. And in verse 2 it says, she has prepared her meat, mixed her wine, and set her table. Well, she is organized and ready to go. I'm guessing she may have asked somebody for help too. Just saying. Then we have folly. She personifies a prostitute. And guess what? She is serving stolen food. In verse 17, stolen water is sweet. Wow. She is signifying this image that appeals to our senses. So folly, she is offering forbidden fruit. And we know how that worked out for Adam and Eve, right? But when we look in between the lines, looking beyond the cover here, the big difference between wisdom and folly, it's their attitude. Wisdom is open. She is welcoming. She is engaged. She is encouraged. She's willing to ask for help. While folly, well, you know what? She doesn't have time for that. She is mad, and she is crabby, and she's not honest, and there is no way that she wants anything to do with wisdom. I want us to think about that. How do we respond? And for me, as I look at this, I don't know that I respond to constructive criticism very well. Could that mean I'm falling into the folly camp? Or am I willing to welcome constructive criticism and take that as wise counsel? In verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. I'm not sure, but I think we've heard that before. How do we apply the Proverbs to our own life? How do we do that? Well, the answer, let's make it straightforward. Just like the Proverbs, they're pretty straightforward, right? Read it, then do it. Read it, then do it. Live it. Live it. Proverbs contain some of the most applicable nuggets of truth that we find in the Bible. And they are succinct statements brimming over with metaphors from the real world. And when we approach the Proverbs that way, it allows us to see how any particular proverb can be applied to any number of our everyday situations. Think about it, even from getting out of bed in the morning to building a strong foundation in our relationships. Think about your everyday dealings. The Proverbs apply. Proverbs also reminds us that God concerns himself not just with the big cataclysmic events of life, but even those mundane, invisible moments in our lives as well. What an awesome God. Proverbs is important because it accomplishes something no other biblical book does. It simply compiles numerous short instructions for living an effective life on earth. Wow. You know, it's true, the other books of the Bible are just as good, right? But they articulate profound theological truths, and they are full of lengthy narratives of triumph and failure or prophetic preaching to a disobedient people. And we need all of those things. We need all of the pieces. However, Proverbs concerns itself completely with instructing people in the path of wisdom. And the writers of this book recognized the varied circumstances in our lives and provided principles to apply to that variety of circumstances in our lives, rather than a step-by-step instruction on a few specific instances that might occur in our lives. I am guessing that each one of you in this room could write your own proverb. A proverb based on your life, the things that you have experienced, the things that you have learned. Maybe something that you could pass down to someone else. Something succinct, something easy to remember. I want you to think about it. So, my grandma, which her name was Flora Olena Magdalene Hansen. How do you like that? And I'm not sure she was the originator of this proverb, because I think she maybe have heard it, but she made it her own. And I think you guys can do that too. If there's a proverb you like, make it your own. So this is her proverb. She would always say to me, Karen, and I didn't think I yelled that much, Karen, when you yell like a fish peddler, people will think you stink. Clearly, my grandma hated yelling. That has stuck with me forever. And now as a grown-up, I have to say, I'm just not a yeller because I don't want to stink. That said, I continue to pray for each one of you that as we navigate these 3 books of the Bible that are just beautiful, applicable to us today, that you will be blessed, and that even in the overwhelming amount of reading, that you will feel blessed to summarize, and that something will jump right out to you that you will want to investigate. Ask hard questions, disagree. It's all healthy, it's all good, it's what God wants us to do. So with that, I say thank you.